Okay, hello, my name is Jimmy Northington. I'm here today to teach you guys a few Excel tricks. I've got about 15 or 20 of them here for starters. I'm calling these quick tips for things that'll help you in your everyday use, things that might save you 10 or 15 seconds here or there, but you'll use dozens of times a day. And definitely over the course of a project will save you hours on end. I have plans for quite a few topics after this, including quick tips, printing, page layout, pasting, find replace, graphs, removing duplicate values, text strings, errors, concatenation, index match, the indirect formula, and a few macro examples specifically displaying tab names. But for today, I'm going to stick to the very beginning with just quick tips on basically keeping your hands on the keyboards, making yourself work more quickly and efficiently as you go through. So one of the easiest things that you can do, so I've got a few windows open here. Say I've got the internet, I've got Excel. It works very well, especially when you use PowerPoint. If you hold the Alt button and press Tab, you have a window that pops up like this, so it'll swap between the two of them very quickly. If you hold the Alt button down and go through multiple times, so 1 tab, 2 tab, 3 tab, etc., it goes through all of the options that you have open on your computer. So it's a very easy way to go back and forth between your last two windows, or even more if you really want to have all those open at the same time. The next one is for getting to shortcuts on your computer. Depending how many subfolders, say those common areas that you go to find information. So in my example here, I just have something on my desktop where I have the first folder, and then I've got the second folder, and then I've got the third folder, and maybe I care about what's in this part right here. Well, one thing you can do is that there's the Windows Explorer right here, and you can actually right-click on it, and it shows you a lot of places that you've been recently, etc. But what you can also do is, as you're browsing through, so the first time you can go and you can say, hey, I want to get to this folder 3 many times from here on out in the future. Right-click the folder. Whoop, sorry, I missed it there. Right-click the folder and drag it all the way down to your Windows Explorer. And now you can see up here at the top it's pinned, so that just by right-clicking and going there, it'll automatically skip all those steps to get there. So that's a very useful one, especially when you go a few folders deep. For moving about Excel, there's multiple ways to move around. You can use the arrow keys. Those are, pretty common sense, up, down, left, right. You can do the same thing with Shift and Enter, or Tab and Enter. So Enter goes down like so. Tab will go right. Also, you can do the opposite. So if you hold Shift while touching either of those, it'll go the opposite direction. So hitting Shift and Enter starts going up, and then Shift and Tab goes left. And then one other way you can kind of layer this in is anytime, so say I start entering information and I'm tabbing over, it doesn't matter how far I tab. Eventually, when I hit Enter, it goes one beneath my original cell. So it's very useful for, if you keep that in mind, you can type in all the information without ever going to the mouse or having to use the arrow keys, so you can kind of power through it quicker. The next one I'll set up here quickly. So say that you have a lot of data. So we're going to paste this all the way down here. Oh, doesn't like me. So we'll paste it a few times. One thing you can do is within a cell, or within anything, you can skip to the end of sections of data. So we mentioned the arrows keys earlier. If you hold Ctrl and hit any of those arrow keys, it will skip to the end of a continuous data set. So what that means is, as long as there's not a gap or a blank cell in it, it'll work. So it doesn't matter if they're numbers, doesn't matter if they're letters. As long as it's full, it'll skip through. And what I did there is you can do the same exact thing, but hold Shift while you do it, and it highlights. So that is very, very useful when you're examining databases. The thing you need to be careful with for both of these scenarios is if suddenly I have a gap, it'll only highlight to the gap, etc. It'll only skip to the gap, depending if you hit Control or Control Shift and the arrow. So it might be very obvious when you have a little bit of data like this, but when you're looking at a few hundred or thousands of lines and it's somewhere down in the 400s, you won't know if you selected it all or not. So I'll delete that quick. There is a way in Excel to quickly scroll through the tabs, so typically you go through and you click each one of these. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. This thing as well, for especially when you have a lot of tabs, you can pull it left or right, so it ends up covering some of your tabs some of the time. It's usually easiest just to pull it all the way over there to the far right. But if you wanted to skip through tabs without actually clicking, if you hold the Control button and hit either page up or page down, so this is with page down, page up, one goes left, one goes right, so it's a way to quickly skip between your tabs. The next topic is for locking cells, so using either F4 or the $sign. This is most often used with summations, any type of formula to be honest, especially when you start getting more complex, index matches, etc. So skipping ahead actually, a quick way to sum, if you hold the Alt button and hit equal, it'll automatically take all the continuous cells up above it and sum them. So that's a very quick way just to sum, only going up above you. It doesn't really work going to the, I guess it does work going horizontally as well. I've had issues with that before. But once again, be careful for if you have more data up above, it tends to just stick to the continuous range. So it'll go there and you can drag it up if needed, or just rearrange your data so it's one continuous block. Okay, so we've got our two little formulas there. So then what if, say I deleted this, no matter where I copy this formula, I always want to reference these three cells right here. So the one thing you can do is if you highlight it, you don't have to click an individual cell. If you click an entire range, it works just as well. Our F4 button is how you go about creating, they're called absolute references. So hitting F4 once, then here's twice, and then 3, and then 4 times brings it back to normal. So what these $signs actually mean, if it's in front of a letter, so let me actually pull back here. This will be a little cleaner. If it's in front of just the number like this, that means that you cannot change any of the row numbers that you see over here on the left-hand side. So if I type this formula in, and no matter how far I drag it, it's always going to say the same thing because I have made it so that the cell or the row F4 or the row 74 will never change. In the same regard, if it's in front of the letter, I will not be able to change that row name. So I can drag it right, I can drag it left. All of these cells have the same exact value because I've locked the column reference. And as you'd expect, having it in front of both means that it'll always look at that one individual cell and nothing else. So I can put that formula anywhere else and it will always look at F7. And once again, probably the quickest way to go about doing this is using the F4 formula. So the first one's going to be absolute, and then it's just in front of the rows, just in front of the columns, back to normal. Same exact result if you go in here and type it like that. You can type it in front of both, etc. It's just a little bit of a quicker way rather than pointing and clicking. In that same regard, actually, with all of our formulas here, say that we had this data set, and then we have another one over here. One thing Excel is pretty good at is as long as you type in at least 3 values, it will start autofilling the formula or the continuous range for you. So you can see as I drag it down, it saw 1, 2, 3, so it can see I'm going up by 1 each time, so it kind of continues that trend. Same thing for just if you have an emergent pattern, it tends to work. Sometimes it'll start repeating the same number. You can see right here it goes by 2s. So say that these are all the months I'm curious in, and this is my formula. I've already typed some of these. No matter if it's one cell or a range, one very useful thing for dragging a formula down, I've kind of done it a few times already, but this little section right here at the bottom right where you see the crosshair, whether you have one cell or an entire range, if you go here you can drag formulas left and right according to that. But one quicker way, if you know you want to go until the end of this entire, once again, continuous data set, double click once and it'll drag it down all the way until the end of your preset range. So especially, once again, when you have hundreds of formulas, thousands of rows, you can just click here, double click once, and there you've copied the formula the entire way down the sheet. It saves a lot of time, especially when you have something that's all the way down here and you have to scroll. So you can see that Excel kind of goes slow when it comes to scrolling down these, especially when you have a few hundred thousands, etc. So once again, we can hit our Control up to pop back into the data we've had so far. And actually, if you're curious and you do not have any data at all in a column or a row, hitting Control up or down goes all the way to the bottom. You can see that right here we're down in the millions of rows, so it'll go all the way left, right, etc. But it'll just go until it hits data, so it'll go until it escapes its gap. So right here, it'll bounce back and forth. If it's blank, it goes to the end of a sheet. Another very useful one is particularly when you get into cross-checking documents and making sure that you've completed initial entries the same. Say you have a complex formula and you're just trying to check if it matches another document. You might paste it over values, so you'll take this over here, paste the values over here, or actually even in a whole nother workbook or tab workbook, etc. So we'll use a different tab or worksheet in this example. You can use Excel to check if entries are the same value. So you hit equal before you hit any formula, but you can actually see if one cell literally equals a second cell. So you can see that, and you can drag it through, etc. One thing that kind of can come into play with this is that when you're dealing with formulas rather than hard-coded entries, maybe you have some complex formula that gives you this value of 4 point, a lot of zeros and 1. It looks like your entries are not equal, and that's practically not true. And they're not exactly equal, but practically those are the same answer. There's a round function, so round, and if you're ever unsure of what a formula does, you can type it right here in the click on the entry, and the Excel help menu is a pretty good starting spot for if you're trying to figure out what individual parameters do within a formula. Here we are. So you can see that there are two parts to it. There's a number and a number of digits. The number is whatever cell number that you want to reference. The second one says how many digits you want to show. 0 will round it to the nearest integer. 1 is 1 decimal place. 2 is 2 decimal places. So in this scenario, we're looking at something that's pretty down in the weeds. So if you're looking for rough order magnitude checks, you can round just to 0, round it to the integer. When you're dealing with millions of dollars, you don't care about fractions of a penny. You can see that then fixes our error. Also skipping ahead a little bit, but one other thing you can do within formulas, there are a lot of ways to document your work as you go through. Right-clicking and going to Insert Comment. Here it is. It gives you a nice little section here for this is how you add a comment. And you can go about and format that. If you go up through here, you can make it permanently show, etc. Same exact thing, but if you use the hotkey or the shortcut Shift and F2, you can do it without right-clicking. So this is another comment. The last one you can do is you can actually comment within the cell. This one's used a lot less often, but also has its own merits for if you do not want people to be able to ignore it, because this only shows typically when you highlight over it. It can be easy to miss when you're moving quickly or if you're unfamiliar with the document. So there is this thing called an end formula. I don't know exactly what it is, but if you type in the end formula and whatever you want to say, put it in quotes, but say this is an in-cell documentation. So notice that doesn't affect our formula whatsoever, but when you click in the cell, it's impossible to ignore this tail end. It kind of adds a string of text as an in-cell comment. So that can be useful at times. Okay. So There's also a way in Excel to go about organizing kind of sets of information. So we've used this one a few times. We haven't exactly given it a header, but say this is data set 1, this is data set 2. One thing you can do is go about and predefine a row of or a column of cells, or pretty much any type of array. I can make this whole thing one, but for this example I'll just use this column here. This little section right here, you can even see it comes up as name box. Say that I wanted to use this one string of data, this array, this column of data very often, so we'll call this just data. So, oops, I hit a button after that. So you can see that my name has changed here. So one thing that's very useful is that I can go back in here and select data without having to go back and click anything. Very useful once again when you have a lot of data. Also, a very nice secondary feature as you get into more complex options is that notice that we had the sum here. It says sum of a range. What will happen is that now if you go to add any of those or do that same formula, it references whatever name you gave it. So these two formulas right here do the same exact thing. Also a bonus tip here. If you ever want to show anything strictly for display purposes, go ahead and in front of an equal sign just add a comma so that you'll see it exactly as it's typed except for the comma, but it will not actually do the formulas, so it's very good for documentation once again, or just displaying, because you can go through and click the formulas, display formulas, right here, show formulas. It kind of makes things look a little bit weird. I lost kind of some context over here. So this is a nice way just for strict display purposes to kind of show what you've done. Or once again, another one of my favorites is to tend to copy this exactly, make a comment in my header so I can show what I've done in that entire column, and then typically it's just dragged down. So that is how you can make a name range. And also right here in the formulas tab you have your name manager. So the same data that I just defined right there, you can either define it here making a new name, or this makes it very nice to edit. So say suddenly I want it to be this entire section. Bam. Now I have new data. So without changing anything, because this referenced the data name set, I now can update my formula just by kind of changing the name of the range I've identified in my formula. So that's actually, I've got just one more kind of extended tip for today. So there's a lot of times when you have multiple things open, there's a lot of ways to get back to the home screen. It's especially useful for when you have multiple Windows Explorers or anything open. Probably the funniest of them, so say that you had a few that are like half defined like this. You can go through, click the top of one of them, and just start shaking it, and it makes everything besides what you've shaken go away. So now I just have this one. So we'll bring those guys up for annoyance factor. A second one you can do is this little section. If you're running Windows 7, I don't know how it works beyond that, and XP is no longer supported but did not do this anyway. If you hover here, it'll show you the desktop kind of in a preview. If you click it, it actually goes there. And then beyond all of that, the most useful one is probably just holding the Windows button and hitting D, and it goes straight there, so you kind of skip all of the intermediate steps. So I tend to use that one, Windows and the D button. So I plan to have many more topics here, as I mentioned before, but these are a lot of items that, even beyond Excel, they work in Word, PowerPoint, just general use of Windows that will make your life easier and a little bit less tedious as you go through your work or whatever you're using Excel for. So thank you very much. Once again, I'm Jimmy Northington, and catch you guys